up specifically, because there is new research out from More in Common, finding that making a success of levelling up is the Prime Minister's last chance to turn things around with voters, according to their survey and research based on polling 4,000 people and focus groups across the Red Wall, seats in those former Labour constituencies. Luke Tryl from More in Common joins us now. What do you say about the results, the findings of your research, that this is Boris Johnson's final chance to repair the damage with those voters?
Well, thank you for having me. You're right. The research shows very clearly that the PM is in last chance saloon when it comes to the voters, and trust in this government has collapsed. When I spoke to you last time I was on the show, I gave the finding that 2/3 of people thought that the UK system was rigged. That figure in the wake of Partygate has now risen to over 80%. So we've been trying to find out what might turn things around, what might restore trust in government. And the answer that came back really strongly was the levelling up policy. It's really had kind of amazing cut through with the public, and people talk in quite animated and passionate terms about what it means for them and their area. And they agree with the government's diagnosis that their areas, their communities have been left behind for a long time. But what they now want to start seeing is that delivery on actually giving a levelling up policy to the country, and that involves making sure that their parks are in better conditions. It means restoring local high streets. It means tackling crime and antisocial behaviour. That's what this government needs to do if it's going to have the reset with voters. And they perhaps need to move away from some of the other Operation Red Meat stuff around the licence fee or where you process migrants, because that just doesn't cut it. What people really want to see to restore their faith in government, to show that government cares, is that we're investing in their communities, in the things which matter in their everyday lives.
And if the Prime Minister and the government don't deliver in the way these voters expect, is there any indication of where they will go politically?
Yeah, so people are definitely giving Keir Starmer and the Labour Party a second look. Lots of these voters abandoned the Labour Party in 2019. They're now saying that actually they'll decide between the Conservatives and the Labour Party on the basis of levelling up. In fact, 7 in 10 of Red Wall voters say that levelling up will be a key decider in terms of who they vote for. But Labour isn't quite there yet and needs to do a bit more to set out their vision for community regeneration. There's also a more worrying undercurrent in some of the focus groups that we've spoken to, that people are fed up with mainstream politicians failing to deliver in general and actually are starting to look elsewhere. And our worry is that if that promise of levelling up, which has really raised expectations about improving deprived communities, isn't delivered, people will start to look outside the mainstream for more populist alternatives, whether that's the Reform Party, whether that's another Nigel Farage reboot. This really is last chance saloon, and it's not just about the Prime Minister and one party. It's about all politicians in the UK, showing that democracy really does deliver for the whole country.
Luke Tryl, thank you very much. Brendan, you feeling nervous listening to all that, sitting there? Your seat, it sounds existential.
I'm going to disagree with some of that, Jo, actually, because whilst I think it's important levelling up and it's something I'm very passionate about, it's not actually just about throwing money at things. I don't knock on the door and they'd say, oh, we need a new tram system, or we must desperately throw all this money at the town centre. A lot of it's about pride in your area again. It's about being positive about it. And I think we have to remember at the election, when a lot of these people came over to us, I'd still say the number one issue in my inbox at the moment, again, is the small boats. Now, I'm in Bassetlaw in North Nottinghamshire. We know we're near the coast. Yeah. Immigration's very low in the area. This is the number one issue because they see it as tying in with taking back control, and it's linked to Brexit. Now, a lot of those people that came over to us, they're culturally conservative, but for historical reasons, they wouldn't vote for us for one reason or another. Now, Brexit was the trigger for that. And I think a lot of people were very frustrated if they don't see that control being taken back. Now, that doesn't mean we don't want, say, the 17 million we've had in a hospital, or we don't want a better town centre, or we don't want more police and so on. Of course people do, but I think it's a little more nuanced than that. And I think that is probably people's bigger frustration. So it's a combination of the two, but I think it's those cultural conservatives and showing that we still really can do what we said we did at the election, which is bring them with us and keep them with us.
Luke, do you want to respond to that?
Well, look, I think Brennan's right that it's not just about flashy new projects. It is about that everyday, that pride in place, that sense of being in the up. But I think voters are a lot more savvy than occasionally politicians give them credit for. They're not easily distracted by, repeating the same announcements on how we're going to deal with channel crossings, even if it's an issue of concern. What really matters to most people is it is that every day. It's the park round the corner. It's the local high street in places like Bassetlaw where we've spoken to people. They want to see those changes, and that's the lens through which they view whether government is working for them or isn't.
We're going to leave it there. Thank you very much, Luke Tryl.